Nobody handed Sam Elliott anything. Not a name, not a connection, not a shortcut through the side door of an industry that has always loved shortcuts. What he built over 50 years in Hollywood, he built the slow way, the hard way, the only way that actually lasts, and the life he lived behind the cameras turned out to be just as extraordinary as anything he ever put on screen. This is the full story of Sam Elliott. From a boyhood shaped by loss and open wilderness, to a love that took nearly a decade to speak out loud, to a career that outlasted almost every prediction anyone ever made about it. Samuel Pack Elliott arrived in Sacramento, California, on the 9th of August, 1944. Born to a mother who taught physical education and a father who worked as a fish and wildlife official for the government. Henry Nelson Elliott was not a man who spent his days behind a desk. He took his son with him into the field, into forests, and along rivers and across land that most children only ever saw in picture books. And those years outdoors gave Sam something that no classroom ever could: a groundedness, a sense of scale, an understanding of what is real and what is just noise. The family eventually relocated to Oregon, and those wide-open landscapes settled into Sam's bones in a way that would surface later in every cowboy role, every Western, every character who seemed to carry the weight of open country on his shoulders without ever having to say a word about it. But the relationship between Sam and his father carried a tension underneath all of that shared time outdoors, and that tension grew sharper as Sam moved toward adolescence. Henry Elliott believed in stability, in college degrees, in careers that made practical sense and paid reliable wages. What he did not believe in was his son becoming an actor. Sam felt the pull of performing from a young age, that quiet but insistent certainty that the stage was where he belonged, and every time he tried to voice it, his father's skepticism rose up to meet him. He enrolled in college to meet his father halfway, went through the expected motions, but the whole time something inside him was refusing to settle. That internal argument between duty and desire defined his early years, and what made it permanently painful was that it never got resolved the right way. Henry Elliott died of a sudden heart attack while Sam was still barely a teenager, and the chance to one day look his father in the eye and say, "You were wrong, watch what I became," that chance went with him. The silence that followed that loss became one of the driving forces of Sam's entire adult life, pushing him forward with the specific urgency of someone who understands that time does not negotiate. Grief did what encouragement alone could not do, and that's when Sam stopped treating acting like a dream and started treating it like a job he already had. His first public recognition came during a local theater production of Guys and Dolls, where a newspaper review praised his performance and told him directly to pursue acting as a career. For a young man carrying the weight of a father who never believed in him, that external validation landed differently than it would have for someone with a smoother path, and it galvanized him in a way that a simple compliment never could. None of that mattered to the industry yet, because the entertainment world does not care about potential or reviews in local papers. Sam needed credits, and credits required auditions, and auditions required surviving in a city that turns most people away before they ever get a real shot. To keep himself afloat while he waited, Sam turned to construction work, spending his days doing physical labor outdoors. And what nobody expected was that this decision would end up shaping his entire career identity. The toughness was not performed. The connection to physical work and open spaces was not manufactured for a character. Every director who later cast Sam Elliott in a role requiring a man who looked like he'd actually lived the life he was portraying got exactly what they were looking for, because Sam had lived versions of it. The construction years did not delay his path to Hollywood. They made him into the actor that Hollywood eventually could not look away from. His first significant screen appearance came in 1969, in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford, which gave Sam a small, uncredited role. But that film changed the entire direction of Sam's personal life, because, on that set, he saw Katharine Ross for the first time, and something shifted in him that did not shift back. Katherine was already a certified star, having earned an Academy Award nomination for The Graduate 2 years earlier, and by 1969 she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had already arrived. Sam was a background actor with no credits and no name recognition, standing at a distance that felt much wider than the physical space between them, and so he said nothing. He carried the memory of her quietly forward through the years that followed, the way certain feelings insist on being kept even when there is nowhere obvious to put them. Television gave Sam the steady ground he needed during those building years. His portrayal of Evel Knievel in a television movie brought him national visibility, and his work in the miniseries Once an Eagle, which ran from 1976 to 1977, confirmed to the industry that he was a genuine dramatic talent. The roles kept coming, supporting parts in films, recurring television work, the slow accumulation of a reputation built credit by credit, and all the while Sam remained selective in a way that frustrated some people around him but protected the thing he was building. The year 1978 brought him back into the orbit of the woman he had never stopped thinking about. Sam and Katharine Ross were cast together in a horror film called The Legacy, and on that set, Sam finally said what he had kept to himself for nearly a decade. He told Katharine about seeing her in 1969, about the feeling that had stayed with him, and about the fact that none of those years had managed to shake it loose. He admitted staying silent the first time because she was the female lead and he was nobody. Katharine had heard plenty of things from plenty of men over her career, but she recognized something different in what Sam put in front of her. She heard honesty without performance, directness without calculation, and that combination proved harder to dismiss than anything polished could have been. Their relationship did not begin cleanly. Katharine was still married at the time to a man named Gaetano Lisi, a film set technician, and the transition into a public romance attracted exactly the scrutiny they both would have done anything to avoid. Playgirl magazine ran them on the cover as Hollywood's sexiest couple in October 1979, and the press covered their every movement with breathless intensity. Sam, who had entered the industry because he believed in the work of storytelling and wanted his name attached to performances rather than headlines, found the whole spectacle draining. None of that frustration pushed him away from Katharine. The result was the opposite, and the shared experience of being watched and judged seemed to draw them closer, confirming for both of them that what they had was worth the inconvenience of protecting. 6 years passed between the start of their relationship and their wedding in 1984, and by the time they married, they knew each other with the depth that only time and difficulty together can produce. Katharine brought previous marriage experience to the relationship, while Sam walked into it having never been married before. Their daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott, arrived the same year they wed, and the family Sam had spent most of his adult life quietly wanting finally took shape around him. The story of the film Mask deserves its own space in the Elliot timeline. The role was that of a warm-hearted biker in the 1985 drama starring Cher, exactly the kind of layered, emotionally grounded character that Sam was built to play. His agent called with the opportunity while Sam was on his honeymoon, and Sam said no, because his honeymoon was not something he was willing to cut short for a screen test. Katharine found out, understood what the role could mean for his career, and told him to get on a plane to New York. She was not the kind of partner who let loyalty to her comfort cost him his future. Sam went, auditioned, got the part, and every major Los Angeles publication praised his performance alongside Cher and Eric Stoltz when the film released. The biker character Garth became one of Sam's most celebrated early roles, and established him as an actor capable of genuine emotional depth on the big screen. Western films were always where Sam Elliott felt most at home, and audiences felt the difference every time he stepped into that world. Something in those landscapes matched something already inside him, and the result was that his Western performances never felt like performances at all. Tombstone, The Quick and the Dead, The Desperate Trail, You Know My Name, These films built a body of work in the Western genre that placed Sam in a category almost entirely his own. In 2007, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum inducted him into its Hall of Great Western Performers, a recognition that arrived not as a surprise but as a formal acknowledgement of what audiences had understood for years. His voice became its own cultural force, entirely separate from his acting work. That deep rolling baritone earned him narration and voiceover work across commercials, trailers, and films, and the demand never slowed. Ashton Kutcher, his co-star on the Netflix series The Ranch, said publicly that he wanted Sam to narrate everything in his life. The Coen brothers were so specific about the narrative presence they wanted in The Big Lebowski that their script notes reportedly referenced Sam Elliott by name as the sound they were going for. The result was one of the most beloved cult films in American cinema history, and Sam's role, while not the largest part, became the one audiences carried longest in their memory. Away from the industry, the Elliott family navigated difficulties that no amount of fame could have prevented. Cleo Rose Elliott went through a period of difficulty that became public when an incident between herself and her mother Katherine led to legal proceedings and a restraining order. For a family that had worked consistently to keep their private lives out of the spotlight, seeing the details spread across headlines was exactly the kind of exposure they had spent years trying to avoid. But the family did not collapse. The legal proceedings ran their course, and in the time that followed, Sam and Katherine and Cleo worked through the damage with the same quiet stubbornness that Sam had always brought to everything that mattered to him. The relationships healed, and the family came back together on the other side of something that could easily have broken them. What Sam Elliott means to the broader story of Hollywood runs against almost everything the industry has historically rewarded. An entertainment world that cycles through leading men the way a river moves through seasons watched Sam Elliott build something that simply refused to become obsolete. When studios told him to shave the mustache in the 1960s and 1970s, Sam refused, and that mustache eventually earned its own entry in the International Mustache Hall of Fame. When roles came along that didn't fit who he was, he passed on them even when the money argued otherwise. His own explanation for his career longevity was almost disarmingly simple. Be very picky about the roles you take on. The advice sounds obvious until you understand how rarely anyone in Hollywood actually manages to follow it, because doing so requires sitting with uncertainty and watching other people move ahead while you wait, trusting that what you are is worth preserving in its original form. At 74 years old, when most actors of his generation had either stepped back from the work entirely or found themselves chasing a relevance that had already moved past them, Sam Elliott delivered what many critics considered the most emotionally layered performance of his career in A Star is Born, earning widespread praise and introducing his work to a generation of audiences who were encountering him seriously for the first time. The performance reminded everyone watching that Sam Elliott had always been capable of this, that he had been bringing this much to his roles for 50 years, and that the industry had simply not always given him material worthy of what he could do with it. The full picture of Sam Elliott is not the picture that tabloid coverage or quick celebrity profiles ever managed to assemble. It is the picture of a man who lost his father before he could prove anything to him, who chose his dream anyway and built it brick by brick through construction work and uncredited roles and years of patient waiting. It is the picture of a man who fell in love at first sight in 1969 and spent nearly a decade becoming someone worth saying so to. It is the picture of a marriage that lasted because both people in it refused to treat it as anything less than the most important project either of them ever worked on. And underneath all of it, running like a current through every decision and every performance and every year of a career that shows no real sign of ending, is the memory of a father who didn't live long enough to see what his son became, but whose influence is present in every frame of everything his son ever did. Sam Elliott never chased the legend. He simply kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept being exactly who he was, and the legend built itself around him while he wasn't looking.